Hello and welcome to the Sprint38 review. We'll go over the work that was accomplished over the last 3 weeks. Next slide. I'll go over the statistics for the sprint. Greg is going to talk about the providers. Jason will talk about the configuration revamp. Greg T is going to talk about the appliance core. Alberto will tell us about news in authentication on the REST API. Dan will give us an update on the UI. Rich on SmartState. And Greg M on Automate Services and Ansible. Next slide. All right, so this was a pretty solid sprint. We had 304 pull requests merged. The distribution is also pretty nice. No one category is kind of hogging anything in that pie chart, so it's really a good indicator. This is also the last, the sprint that's just now starting, Sprint39, is the last sprint for Darga feature completion, and we'll, after that, we will cut the Darga branch and start stabilizing that. So I'm guessing that the next few sprints are going to have more bug fixes going on. Not this one, not 39, but 40 and on. Probably 40 and 41 will have much more bug fixes than enhancements. All right, next slide, please. Breakdown by category. The UI has 96, is that what it is? And providers had 71, which seem to be kind of, I think, pretty common as we're going here. And then we have 35 in the core and 33 in internationalization. We've been doing a lot of work there. On the providers, the split is also fairly common. Containers, Azure, and we've also done some VMware work, and the Hawkular team is stepping up. So really kind of all the providers are kind of happening. The Google guys are doing their thing. So really a really good, solid distribution of the providers. Next slide, please. This is the chart that I started with last sprint. So as you see, this sprint is almost identical to the previous sprint, which is good. So I really want to kind of try to keep us at that line. I don't know why it says that we didn't hit 300, even though I think we hit 304. So Marianne, maybe you can review that for next time. But they are quite similar.
I can tell you why. I can tell you why right now, because some things are double labeled. So you can take a look at that.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at it together. Very good. Yeah, so I'm just trying to see what this will give us, and I think just having the chart there, maybe we'll find patterns that are not obvious yet. So we'll keep working on this thing to see what information we can glean from this. Next slide, please. In terms of all the repos, 304 were in ManageIQ, and you have the others there that were affected. Azure had 14, so not only did we do a bunch of changes in the ManageIQ repo for Azure, we also had 14 changes here, so we're obviously making good progress there. ManageIQ org is just the website, the appliance build, the self-service, the Ansible stuff, all the stuff that kind of is represented in ManageIQ has other repos that it uses that are also getting attention. Next slide, please. All right, over to Greg Blomquist.
All right. So there's a number of great things to cover for Sprint38, so I'm just going to jump right into it. First off, I'll point out a few highlights from all the numerous pull requests across the providers. As Oleg was pointing out, it was a pretty wide distribution this sprint, which is really, really cool. With the ongoing pluggable providers work, Marcel is continuing to track down the last bits of Amazon-specific code in order to move everything Amazon out to a separate gem. So just as a reminder, Marcel's effort here is proving out this notion of being able to fully separate provider-specific code from the core ManageIQ code base. And the more we separate these code bases, the better we understand how to build APIs that allow provider integrations to look more like integrations into a provider platform. So it's really important work. It's really cool. And we're still tracking down the last bits of how to make that happen. Dan and Brona added support for using the HTTP proxy setting from the VMDB configuration with Azure. So previously, the only provider that used the HTTP proxy setting was Amazon. And this setting, it allows users to proxy their HTTP request bound for Azure through an internal HTTP proxy. And Adam, he added support for differentiating read-only data stores in VMware. And previously we collected all data stores, but we didn't inspect whether hosts mounted these data stores, or that hosts that were mounting these data stores were treating them as read-only or not, and now we do. Before jumping to the next slide, I want to call out the OpenStack and container integration teams. Both teams had a really good number of PRs merged this sprint. Most were UI updates, so Dan is going to talk about those when we talk about the UI portion of the review. But I just want to extend thanks to both teams for their continued contributions. Next slide. So here's the thing. Ladislav's been working for the last couple of sprints adding in a new provider type, a cloud networking provider. This first implementation uses OpenStack Neutron as the basis for the details of a cloud networking provider. Ladislav sent me a number of screenshots, like 20 or something, to include in the sprint review and asked if I'd walk through them. However, he promised me that next sprint review, when he integrates the topology widget, he'll record a video and show that off. So that'll be really cool. I'm looking forward to that. But for now, it's picture book time. In these first screenshots, we can see the cross-linking between an OpenStack cloud provider and a Neutron networking manager. You're going to hear me talk about cloud provider, networking manager. We're still working out some of the terminology, so don't get bogged down with that yet. But some of the details that used to reside under the cloud provider can now be found under the networking manager. For instance, security groups, floating IPs, and subnets are now under a networking manager. Next slide. So here we can see the detail page for a floating IP. It shows which cloud provider and which networking manager it's linked to. It also links to the instance that's using that floating IP. Next slide.
Yeah, I just want to point out here that there's a brand new networking main tab here that I believe didn't exist before. So all the stuff that Greg is showing is really under that brand new tab.
That's a good point. I actually didn't even call that out. I was letting it be intuitive. No, I'm kidding. I totally forgot to put that in my speaker notes here. So these, did we go to the next slide? Not yet. Jump to the next slide. Perfect. So these screenshots show the detail pages for subnet and router. The subnet links to its router, and the router shows the number of subnets that are under it. And both of them show the number of instances that are using each. Of course, clicking the number of instances will show a page listing those instances under the subnet or the router. And next slide. So the final screenshot I selected is kind of highlighting this feature. Shows a security group. And here we can see the list of firewall rules for the security group, as well as the number of instances using the security group. And again, if you click on that number, it'll show you the list, the actual list of instances that are bound by that security group. So there's a lot of great work here from Ladislav with the networking provider, way too much to show with a series of screenshots. But I'm kind of treating this as a bit of a teaser until Ladislav gets the topology widget in and we can throw a video together and demo more of the features. Next slide. All right, so Heiko Rupp from the Middleware team sent me a video. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it to the review, so he asked if I would kick it off. I listened to it last night. The narration is a little quiet, so if you listen, you can probably hear it. If it's too quiet, I'll speak over it, but that'll be unfortunate because then you won't be able to hear Heiko. So I'm going to steal screen share. All right, let's see how this goes.
Now a new middleware provider in ManageIQ that got added in Sprint37, and I'll show you how that works. As with the other providers, you can just add a new provider here. Call this Lottie, living on the edge. It's a Hawkelau server. Host name is living on the edge. Hawkelau.org. Port 80, username Judo.
So Marianne said you guys can't hear, which is unfortunate. So Heiko's walking through adding a new middleware manager. And he just kicked off a refresh.
The icon is also the Hawkelau icon.
And now we can see after the refresh, you can see the number of actual deployments that are attached to that middleware server. And in just a moment here, he's going to click on the deployments. So here we can see the list of actual WAR files that are on that middleware server. So WAR files are Java archive files for web applications. And he's also integrated the topology widget, so you can see the Hawkelau server and how it's bound to the different web applications. Marianne, if you want to steal back the slides. So before we jump to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of call out this notion of pulling in this middleware and web application data. This is it's actually really exciting for me because and kind of a number of ways. I started out my career as a Java developer, so it's interesting to see us pulling in these Java web applications and showing them like this. The other piece, though, that's really interesting to me is that we're starting to pull together this full view from the top to the bottom. So we're showing in this one sprint review, we're showing a separation out to a networking provider. So we can start to see specific information that's related to networking, but we're also getting to see the ability to pull in applications. So from the containers team, we're pulling in containers. We can pull in applications. Eventually, we can start linking all these things together and start seeing how all of these things impact each other. And for instance, if some piece of networking goes down and it's going to affect one of these applications, the goal, the ultimate goal, is to be able to show how any of those applications might be impacted by that networking change. That's it for me. So next slide, over to, I believe, GT.
No, Jason.
Nope.
Oh, Jason.
Okay, so in this sprint, the configuration revamp was finally merged.
Yeah.
How
long has that been in the works?
Well, technically about 2 years, but I've been working on it really hard for like the last 3 months. I put the pull request link there because the initial post of the pull request actually has a lot of detail on how it works and what it provides us. So if you want a lot more detail, you can go there. I'm just going to give a high level here and describe a little bit about some of the features that developers might really like, since this is a pretty heavy developer focused meeting. The config revamp relies heavily on the config gem. The config gem is a really cool gem that has a stacking mechanism, so you can take different configurations and apply changes one on top of another in a stack-like fashion. So if you look in the little screenshot I took below, I spit out the sources that we use. And you can, starting from the top, which is sort of the bottom of the stack, if you will, settings.yaml is our new YAML file that was compiled from all the different template YAMLs. So I took them all together, slammed them in one YAML, and that's the basis of our configuration. And then on top of that, there's a file called config settings development YAML. Any changes that are in there are applied on top of that. And then there's an environments development YAML. Currently it's empty, but it gives us options for doing things. And then you'll see the next one is a database source. So there's a new table called settings changes that stores changes that users have made. And those changes are tied to a particular server. So on a specific server, you have whatever changes were made for that server. And those changes are applied on top of the settings from the previous steps. And then at the bottom there, you'll see there's three more. There's a settings local YAML, development local YAML, and an environments development local YAML. Those are changes that you can actually, for developers, you can actually put on your local machine if you want to override the settings at a file level. So if you don't want to go through the database, say you want to change logging to info or something, or debug, you just go in there, you add it in, and you're done temporarily. Settings local will be applied in all modes, dev, test, prod. But if you only want to do something in development, you'd put it in development.local. If you only want to do something in test, you put it in test.local. So a lot of flexibility here, and it's really cool. The settings basically are accessible through a new top-level class called settings. And the VMDB settings class, which is also new, is meant for acting upon those settings. So if you want to do things like save changes, walk it to like mask passwords or do something like that, that's all in the VMDB settings class. The next slide I'll show you a little bit of how that works. VMDB config is deprecated at this point. It still works. I didn't change any of the callers, but I do log a debug message. So if you're in debug mode, you'll see a lot of deprecation warnings. The goal is to eventually switch all those VMDB config calls over to settings calls. And I think that's it for this slide. Next slide. So I put together just a quick, this is what I would live demo, but I didn't want to live demo. So a little bit of how it works. The first line shows you how we currently do it with VMDB config. So you say VMDB config new, config fetch path, all long thing. So in our settings right now, token TTL is 10 minutes. The new way is on line 2. You just say settings.api.token TTL, get the exact same value. What's cool about this is two things. The VMDB config new at the top would actually hit the database every single time you call that. So it looks for changes, even if nothing's changed, right? Because it doesn't know. The new settings guy is loaded once in memory, and it's stored in memory, and that's it. And if you want to reload it, you call settings.reload on demand. So performance-wise, it's much, much better. You'll also notice it's a lot simpler, shorter. Settings also allows you to access via square bracket. So you can access, you can do settings square bracket string API or symbol API. So if you need to dynamically access a setting, you could. So on line 3, what I decided to do was just insert a change into the database attached to my current server. So that was that middle of the stack there where you can make local changes on your database. So I'm just creating one. The key, as you can see, is /API/token_TTL, and the value is 2.minutes. So after I save it, and then on line 4, reload the settings and check it again, you'll see it switched to 2 minutes. So it overrode what was in the base settings YAML. On line 5, I created a file called settings.local.yaml just to show you what it would look like. It's basically a YAML file storing API token TTL, and I set it to 1 minute. Reload the settings, and there you can see on line 6 that it's 1 minute. And then reversing all the process, delete the file, it goes back to 2 minutes, which was what is in the database, and then delete the changes out of the database, and it's back to 10 minutes, which is in the file. So you can see it just resolves when it needs to, and that's basically it. Pretty simple to use, and it's a little wet, so we had a couple of issues out of the gate, but I'm hoping to get them fixed up this next few days. And I think that's it. If there's any questions?
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this allows, in the future, for us to add features like having settings at the zone level and at the region level. So this kind of paves the way for that to happen. So I'm expecting that kind of change to hit in the autumn release. So post-Darga, the e-release, will probably have that kind of stuff.
I think one other cool feature that this opens up is we've had a lot of requests that people don't want to use our UI to set the settings. They want to use Puppet or Ansible or Chef. You could do it with this. You just deploy that settings local YAML file, and you're done. So we'd have to do probably some tweaking where, if somebody deploys that way, then we need to turn off the UI because things are going to conflict. So turn off UI configurations, and that means you're going to deploy with Puppet or Ansible or whatever. But the feature is available with this.
Very cool. Thanks, Jason.
Next slide.
Yep.
Okay, so on the client core side, we're continuing to work on geological for replication. It's actually pretty close. It's a usable state at this point. Next sprint will be getting the configuration UI that's in progress now and just doing the hardening. But for Sprint38, Nick has added a couple classes that basically raise up the some of the raw geological functionality into Ruby, so that the MIQ geological class basically just provides generic functionality on top of the low-level geological commands, and some of that's used for the rake tasks that will handle creating in geological subscribers and nodes and doing the synchronization, much like you had in the old Ruby rep. And then also geological subscription model, which is built on top of the geological low-level stuff, but it presents itself as an active record model, and that would allow us to present statistics and things like that, and also do the configuration in the UI of geological for replication. So it's really come far. It's pretty close. Going great. Next slide, please. So in Chargeback, there's been a bunch of progress being made. The team in Spain, that's led by Sergio Con, all community developers, we got a bunch of their PRs merged. We have some bigger ones coming up in the next sprint, but I'll just talk about the ones that got in for this sprint. So they've added some tenant-based stuff to Chargeback. So the first thing is being able to assign rates to tenants and being able to pick up the rates when you run the Chargeback on the tenant that is owning the resources that are being reported on. So they have a screenshot there, and you can see they've added tenant down there as a rate assignment option. Next slide, please. So then with that, being able to generate reports by tenant as well. So then you could see the list of tenants there in the report by tenant there. So there's a tenant option as well, and then you could pick a tenant blue, tenant green, tenant users. Those are 3 tenants that are in the system.
So is that reporting just for chargeback or reporting in general?
That is just for chargeback.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So another enhancement that they've made to chargeback is being able to add currencies to rate. So this really just indicates what currency the rate is going to be in, and that would show up on the report as well. And these are some of the ones that are supported now, but later on, users will be able to add additional currencies if they need to in their, in their locale or whatever. And it would be an option here, and also show up alongside the rate and alongside the cost in the report.
Cool. I could see exchange rates in our future.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, next slide. Okay, so tenancy-specific work is also ongoing, and Chris Arcan with LJ as well have been scratching their heads over how to split out MIQ group into what we want to do, users and entitlements. Right now, the group contains entitlements, which entitlements would be defined as the roles that are attached to a group, as well as the filters that basically dictate what places that the role that is given to the group can operate on. So in other words, like really where you can do things. So we need to do this to get the flexibility that we would need to be able to share entitlements across tenants, so that you could have a tenant A that has some resources and a role that allows you to operate on those resources, and you want to give it to some group in tenant B, you'd be able to connect that entitlement to tenant B. Right now, you can't do that because it's only on the group. And also, the entitlement would dictate the scope from a tenant perspective of where that entitlement can operate. So anyway, I think the trick with this was more figure out how not to do it than how to do it, because pretty much every click through the UI that you make is going to run through this code to figure out, through all the RBAC code basically, to figure out who you are, what group you're in, what your entitlements are, and then and then calculate if you can do something. So what we did as the first step to this is create a new model called entitlements, and that has the roles that lives under the MIQ group. And in the next phase, they'll be pulling out the filters out of the group, putting that in entitlements, and then ultimately renaming MIQ group to user group, and then getting rid of MIQ group altogether. The other thing that I forgot to mention is the last bullet there, that long-standing issue as far as lack of flexibility when you're defining your groups in LDAP and mapping them on the ManageIQ side. Being able to pull the entitlements out gives more flexibility there as well, so you can have you could be a member of multiple groups and have multiple entitlements that you would get from that. So that's kind of where we're going with that, and we want to be able to have multiple entitlements as well, so that that's a challenge in itself, but that'll be also addressed in a later phase. Okay, next slide. Another enhancement on the Appliance console that Nick did, cleaned up the database setup options. Previously, there was a database configuration option on the Appliance console, and that asked a bunch of questions. And I guess depending on how you navigated through that, you got to configure the things that you needed, but it was kind of not obvious where to go with that. So he kind of cleaned that up, made a sub-menu off of that to simplify the configuration, and also multi-appliance configuration as well. And so there's a screenshot of that sub-menu there. And also, the old setup database region was renamed to reset configure database, because that's ultimately what it does. what it did. Hopefully that's much easier for people to use. I guess one caveat too is that I think Nick mentioned to me the other day that in doing this, I think it changed some of the numbers of where things are. So if people are used to just hitting those numbers, they better take a closer look at it. I think that's it for the appliance core, and I think next is Alberto. Talk about the cool stuff he's done.
All right, so we had quite a bit of activity this past sprint in the Authentication Land. So a couple of changes that came in. There was an incompatibility between the RHEL 7 IPA client and 6X servers, but they made a change to that, so we're now leveraging that. So our appliance, when you configure external auth, it will work with both 7X and 6X IPA servers. The next change that came in, we got the initial SAML authentication work merged in. That has been tested and verified with Keycloak 1.8. So let's see. The appliance itself, well, we now include a SAML Apache module for our use. We're providing a template specifically for SAML authentication. And the changes in here are for the web admin. So the authentication for SAML is right now only for the web UI. So there's a couple of configuration options for SAML, and as well as work from Eric, who's enhanced our login screen to support that. Next slide, please. All right, yeah, so let's just jump into the demo. If I could steal, yeah, I'll share. Other desktop. Okay, let me start that. All right, so we have here an appliance out of the box, but it's been configured the Apache side already with Keycloak SAML authentication. So on the Keycloak side, essentially you would create a realm for the one or more appliances. Here I've created the ManageIQ service provider, and what you would do is create a client for each of the appliances. Here you see the endpoint for my test appliance. All that goodness in here, you'll see the endpoints defined for the appliance specifically, the SAML2 endpoint, post response, as well as further down you'll see the logout. So I mean that's how the Keycloak and the Monolith Melon tend to communicate here. So other than that configuration, there's a requirement from our side as far as the SAML parameters that are coming down. This will be all documented shortly. Here I've created a couple of test users and the groups that they're assigned to that we need that for role mapping on our side. So that is the Keycloak side of things. Let's jump back to the appliance. So we're going to do our initial database-driven admin login here. So in here, the first thing to do would be to configure the external authentication. So let's jump to configure authentication and select external HTTPD. And here you'll see a couple of new controls. One is to enable SAML, and the other one is disable local login. We'll talk about that later. So with that saved, when you log out, you will notice a new control on the main login screen, which allows people to log into their using SAML as well as the local admin. So we have clicked that. So you see we're redirected to Keycloak. We're logging in with that IDP, you see the ManageIQ service provider that was configured before. So with this user, you'll see the groups that were pulled in from Keycloak that were defined out there. So that's the first configuration. The next, we'll talk about the enabling single sign-on. That's the same option we had for Kerberos SSO with IPA, and it behaves the same. So with that enabled, when you log out, you have the option to log back in if you need to as admin, or with that login. But essentially with SSO, if you first hit the appliance, in this case we're just refreshing, you'll see the auto redirect to the Keycloak ID. All right, so the last option that was added, the disable local login. So some customer environments do not want anyone to be able to log in with the local admin. They want to control everything with the IDP. So when they select that option, there's no visual of anything of our local login. So when you log out, you won't see any of the bluish screen that's directly redirected by a controller to the service provider, to the IDP. So with that, everything's controlled. So for people to do stuff with super admin, they'll have to assign them appropriately on the IDP side. If we log out, we go directly to the IDP login page. And of course, if they want to re-enable that or what have you, they'll need to log in either here via a super admin account to re-enable the local login, and we'll also provide an ability with the Appliance console. And log now, it should be back to our main login screen with that control. So that's the extent of that demo. So let me unshare. Go back to the slides, Marianne.
Nice work on the SAML stuff.
Right, next slide, please. All right, so the changes that are coming in shortly. So we have a doc, so that will be updated. That'll be in ManageIQ docs as far as configuring all that goodness on the Apache side. So the configuration is all Apache Mod.Melon based, so it's a generic implementation, and this can be it should be reusable with other IDPs. So going with AD federated services or others in the future should be essentially a testing exercise. So the other thing I mentioned was the Appliance console will have a new entry for controlling the external auth options. So that will be coming in soon. And the last part, which work we started, is to enable the REST API to authenticate with SAML using the enhanced client profile. So right now, it's only the local admin. So obviously, REST API will not work with SAML, which means also the self-service UI will not. So once we enable that, that should be the next steps. That's it for authentication. Next slide, please. Okay, on the REST API front, Tim has done excellent enhancement here where we have bumped up our filtering to use MIQ expressions, and the goodness with that is we can now filter on virtual attributes as well as the first level association on first level attributes of first level association. So, and as an example here, we're saying, hey, give us name and vendor hardware. We're interested in VMs that have a hardware and memory more than 8 gig. So it's really powerful. Nice work. Next slide, please. All right. The next enhancements, we had an action refresh dialog field that was available on service templates. The request here is that not all dialogues were provisioning dialogues for like custom buttons and such, so we had to provide the same action on service dialogues. So the signature was similar, but that kind of opened up the door to be able to do the dynamic refresh on any kind of dialogue. So that was added in this print. Next slide, please. Okay, and this last enhancement, Tim enhanced our definitions so that we have the right role defined in the collection entries. So when you ask for the authorizations hash, you also get a correlation from the top level for the VMs mapping to the collection entry point, not just on the actions. So that kind of gives more of a complete relationship. So. And that's it for the rest. So, next slide, please.
All right, looks like I'm on. This is Dan, and going to go over the user interface changes that were made in this sprint. You can see here kind of in the summary of the PRs, a lot of bugs. I expect those to kind of start going up as people start testing, the final betas and versions, and et cetera, as we head towards Darga. And although we did get quite a few enhancements in, and still a lot of refactoring going on. So that as well will probably push the bug discovery up. As far as new functionality, you can point out a few areas. We noticed that the devices screen in the VMs was missing somehow. That had been there from the beginning, so we added that back in and also put in some of the details on the network adapters. In the cloud area, OpenStack team added some more. They're trying to fill out their UI. Added key pairs and object stores. Probably a lot of other smaller areas as well. On the styling side, you'll see, like I said before, I think in previous demos, see more of the bootstrap switches showing up. I've got one example here that's pretty nice. We're currently trying to get converted over to C3 charts. Some of those are in there. It is not the default yet, but that's the goal, is to replace the JQ plots with the C3 charts. It's going to give us the ability to, first of all, we'll be compatible with Patternfly, and then second of all, we'll be able to move forward with actually adding in the interactivity for the charts. On the self-service UI, trying to get up to par with what exists in the admin UI, and one of those pieces that was missing was support for the custom buttons that use dialogues. So we've got a demo of that. Containers group, of course, still blazing along. As you saw at the beginning, they have like the most provider PRs across the board. So they did add a new container builds tab. There's some other things going on. They did some chargeback work. I saw some PRs go through with that, and you'll see that in some of the UI. And just basically fixing bugs and a lot of minor enhancements, just a little adding small links here and there and more information. So containers really filling out. Next slide. So I'll start showing some screenshots. This is the VM devices tab, where you can actually get into the details of the different devices on a VM and instance as well. Next tab. You can also drill into the network adapters. These aren't really filled in too much, but obviously if you have something that has more data on it, you'll see more of those fields filled in. Next. So on the cloud side, these are the key pairs. So you can see there's new sub-tabs there for key pairs, as well as object stores, which we'll get into in a second. So you get a list of those. Next slide, you can drill in and see the summary for those. And the next slide, move into the objects. So object stores, you can get a list of those. You can go into the summary. You see that it'll also show the cloud objects, the number of cloud objects inside there. So you can drill down into that. So next slide would show the actual objects. And finally, going down, you can actually see a summary of the detail for those objects. So pretty cool stuff. Next. All right, so yeah, they're continually trying to add, modernize the UI. There you can see the server roles. Instead of having checkboxes now, you turn them on and off. Just makes more sense. It just looks cleaner, and it's like real easy to see which ones are on and off. So I like this. This stuff is moving throughout the UI. Any place we see opportunity to use these switches, we put them in. Next slide. So here's some the C3 chart examples that are coming in. Like I said, this is not the default yet. I think you can turn it on, but there's no real need to. Pretty soon we'll have them all in. We should by the final release have the C3 charts fully replacing the JQ plots. So there's a side-by-side bar graph. Next slide, I think, is the column charts. Yep, stacked columns. So there's also donuts and pies. We kept all of the original ones we had. The only thing that's missing is the 3D charts that you may have seen in the past. Those don't exist in most of the new modern charting software. Next slide. This, I think, is a stacked area chart. So kind of cool, very consistent. It'll also get us consistent with other products using Patternfly, because they'll all be using C3 charts. All right, next slide. Container side, this is container builds. Okay, you can see here you're looking at a container provider, and you got the link to the builds for that provider. Next slide. And then you can drill in and get the summaries of those builds as well. All right, next slide. All right, so Eric from Greg M's team is going to do a demo, show a demo of his work on the custom buttons that use the dialogues. Eric?
All right, cool. Let me share my screen. Continue sharing. Looks like, is it working?
No, you might have to press the share my desktop button, I think.
You have to choose if you want to share your window or your desktop too. It won't start it until then.
The place that the share button is, you have to click on the people icon first. Yeah.
Okay, is it working now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so first you can see that we have a generic custom button group and a specific custom button on this service. This is the old UI. So this stuff button group will be on this service as well. So we have the stuff, and you can see they have different specific custom buttons for this service. So we'll try this one. It didn't record my mouse, so that's why I'm moving this. So we have this dynamic text box. It has text 75, and refreshing it updates the values. So over in the self-service UI, you can see we have the same stuff, generic buttons, and the custom test button for this service. And if we go over to the to my Testorino service right here, you can see we have the stuff as well and the custom actions that are on this service. You can also see that when the screen gets smaller, so I opened up my console, it collapses it into a single column view. So that's part of the responsive UI for the self-service UI. So we'll try that same action, and we've got test 83 this time. Refreshing gives test 33. Refreshing again is test 61. So it updates just like it did in the Ops UI. And that's it.
I think that's it with the UI. Whoever's next.
Okay. So this sprint, Barry was continuing his work on SCVMM sprinting. As you recall, last time it was working, but there were some performance issues, and we had to support network-mounted Hyper-V virtual disks. Support for those disks have been added, and there was a discovery on some strange read behavior that kind of made our current cache implementation not optimal, and Jerry worked on that to help that. There's probably still some gains here and there to pick up, so that'll be an ongoing investigation, but how much faster is it now, Terry?
20 to 30%, depending upon the disk.
Okay, so we picked up 20 to 30%.
And maybe Alex K can validate that in his testing.
But were the performance improvements merged this sprint, or are they still open?
Yeah.
Yeah, merge them.
Okay, cool.
We've been working on implementing SmartState analysis for Azure, and we've had parts of that merged, additions to the Azure Armrest gem to enable the reading of offset length data from a blob, which is essentially a disk in Azure. Added an abstraction on top of that, the Azure blob disk, which sounds like something from a science fiction movie. And then on top of that, the Azure VM. So basically, this is the low-level infrastructure to support SSA, and which still needs to be integrated into the SSA path, which will be the final step, and then we should have full support for images and instances for SmartState analysis in Azure. Next slide, please. Okay. As part of the work on the Azure, we basically started addressing some of the shortfalls in testing that we've had in the GEMS pending area, especially around some of those classes for SmartState analysis, and some general improvements. Hopefully, we added a test environment helper, which is common code that enables you to have per test configuration, and it governs the structure of where recording cassette files are placed in the tree structure, and it also lets you define configuration settings and variables for the test separate from the actual test spec file itself. Kind of a takeoff of the secrets filtering that Dan B did, but this also handles layered structure, so it'll automatically give you the default. It'll automatically switch between the secrets that we don't want checked into the repository and your local secrets. So recording and playback switching is as easy as setting an environment variable to go back and forth between the two of them. And that's it for that. Hopefully we'll be able to, right now the only tests that take advantage of this is the tests for the Azure stuff that I checked in. Hopefully we'll be able to extend that and also extend our test coverages to other areas in SmartState and the GEMS spending. That's it. Next slide.
All right, so for Automate, I was modifying this slide a little bit this morning, which is always a bad idea. So I think that first line should really be that the enhancement was to allow the Automate state fields to support calling methods, where previously the state fields only contain relationships, which required you to fully qualify paths to a different class. So this, we were finding teams that were using the same pattern where they would start to use the ORentry field to specify the method sitting in the same class as the state machine. Problem with that, or the issue around that, is that ORentry doesn't support retry logic. So if your state ends up doing retry, it fails. It wasn't, it was a constant pattern. So we really wanted to start to be able to support this. So we added a new syntax where you can specify method : and then the method name. So the method and the state machine instance can live in the same class. Obviously, the benefits are kind of what I mentioned before, is they can live together, and it supports the retry logic as well. And kind of gets cut off a little here. If you go to the next screen, we can see a screenshot of what it looks like when it's configured. So here we have state machines as the class, a sample instance, which would contain your multiple states, and then the methods live in that same class. So now those can kind of package, live together. If you're importing, exporting, that stuff lives together, a little bit cleaner and simpler to manage. So I think we'll probably start using that quite a bit ourselves as well. And I know other teams we're kind of encouraging them to switch to this new format. So then on the modeling side, we added the Azure auto placement support as well. It's just cleaning up some loose ends around the cloud auto placements. Next slide. So two things here, really back-end changes, but the next sprint they'll be visible. So services now always get added to a service order, or really a cart. So we're doing it in the background today. We order it. You won't see anything different, but that object is being created in the next sprint, we're looking at, from the self-service UI, being able to select a service, add it into the cart, and then once you're ready to order, you order the entire cart. So those elements sit there. It's per user, per tenant, so you can switch to different tenants and order stuff in that cart, come back. The stuff is there. Once you order, then the whole thing gets processed in one shot. So, and then obviously you'll be able to see the service orders as well. That's missing in the UI at the moment. Technically not services, but VMware, we added support in the back end to be able to add and remove disks as part of the reconfigure that we support today, which allows you to change the CPUs and memories and those values. So this will extend that support. You can specify, thin provision, size, a couple different values around the disk. So that got merged in this sprint. And next slide. So then the other work is around Ansible, where we got the modeling in for the jobs, as well as backend support, or the gem support for being able to limit the target machines that the job is running for. So Ansible, you normally specify an inventory which can contain a large number of systems, and on each job run, you might want to limit which specific targets you have there. So if you had an entire EMS and you were actually provisioning a new machine and you needed to run that job for that, you just want to target that one machine. We got that in. So in progress, we have PRs around these. There are being able to run from automate, basically think of provisioning or custom button, being able to kick off an Ansible power job, having it supported as a service type, and then we're also working on linking. So Ansible knows about resources from other providers, and we want to be able to link and jump between those resources. So we're modeling, getting that working this sprint. I think that is it. Next slide.
All right, Jason, you want to add something?
We don't have a slide for it, but I wanted to mention that we also have 2 new download types on our website. Microsoft SCVMM image you can download on the website. There's also an image for QEMU/KVM, which I believe downloads the QCAP2 image, or the OpenStack image, because it ends up being the same thing. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right. With that, I open it up for questions on Blue Jeans here, or on the phone, or whatever.
Hi, this is Dan. I had a question for Jason on the configuration. Can you do per provider configuration? In other words, this might be a bad example, but if I had, say, a separate proxy for Azure and a different one for Amazon, can you do that?
We would have to probably change the configuration itself to say like proxy, and then under that a key for Amazon or whatever, similar to how we would do it for, like we do it for like the event catcher and some other things. I didn't mention this during the config revamp, but another feature that we can do is this helps support pluggable providers. So if you had a plugin that supplied its configuration subsection, then it can register that configuration bit into the stack, and we can say, okay, load all the plugins and stick them in the stack at different layers. So we can start splitting up the configuration, and each plugin can own its own key that it cares about. So on that note, yeah, we could split it out into an Amazon key and then an Azure key, and those can live in their respective files.
Cool. Sweet. Jason,
It also seems like we could probably do that. We could probably zone them, right? We could have the providers zoned out and then have the configuration files for the different zones on the different appliances.
I mean, yeah, eventually, once we have zone level and region level changes, then yeah, you could set a proxy level setting at the zone level, and it would apply to all appliances in that zone.
Unless overridden by...
Unless overridden by a specific appliance.
Right. Yeah. All right. I think there was another question by Kevin Morey or someone about migrating current users to the new configuration revamp, how you see that happening in Darga and beyond?
Migration, there's a regular data migration that takes the existing configurations table, finds what's different from the template, and then creates those settings changes for us. So it's just a normal upgrade process.
So they shouldn't see anything. It should be completely seamless to the users.
It should be seamless to the users. We did find one bug that was addressed early on, but you know.
The design is that it's seamless, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, guys? I'll take silence as a no. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone. And Sprint39 is the last one before we branch Darga. So let's get all the features that we want in Darga in. And I really want to say, you know, as Brad is saying on mine here, great sprint, guys. And I agree, it's been chock full of features here. So let's keep it up. And looking forward to seeing everyone in 3 weeks again. Thanks. Awesome.
Everyone.
Bye.